Hi, welcome to the Also Called podcast, where we're asking hard questions about our place in this hectic world.
Join us as we dig into the truth about who God is, possibly discovering that we are also called. Welcome back to the Also Called podcast. We're in season 2, hot and heavy, and this episode we'll be talking about neurology. What is it? What's the big deal about it? Why is it on everybody's minds these days? Haha, pun intended. We're just two friends looking at all the questions, looking to Jesus and the Word to figure out this thing called life and what it means to live in faith. So join us this episode as we're looking at the fascinating field of neuroscience and how our biology shapes our choices, our relationships, and our ability to connect with God. So get ready as we journey into the heart of the show. Let's get started.
All right. So I am super excited to be talking about this. If you joined us for season 1, we pointed you to our YouTube channel. Or if you got our study guide, they're not Scantrons. That
QR codes.
My age, right? QR codes. There's these QR codes. It will take you to our YouTube channel. And so it has multiple discussions that we're talking about each disciple. And if you got our book, The Other Disciples, then you will notice there's a section in each chapter that talks about the psychology or neurology that may be an issue that our disciple was potentially struggling with. And I loved that section. I love that we look at the whole person. Scripture obviously is beautiful and God gives us the instructions that we need, but there are also little nuggets in there too. Like we have to keep our mind focused on honorable things, on good things. There's a renewing of our mind each day. So there are nuggets in there that to me imply that there are tools that he's going to give us. And just talking about the divine design, there are certain plants that grow in only certain areas where a particular animal lives, and it has to have this one type of thing to be able to survive. So it's beautiful to see how God created that in the world, but he created that in our body too. So I just think it's fascinating. And so I love that we're going to jump into this a little bit specifically about neuroplasticity, neuroscience. It seems to be a hot topic these days. And we're going to link a few other podcasts that are outside resources. Lots of great conversations. Some of them are more spiritually based. Some of them are not. If you nerd out on it like I do, then you will love these episodes that goes a little bit more detail, but we're just kind of gonna give you an overview of how God designed us and why it's so awesome.
I agree. I think for me, understanding why I physiologically do what I do and how that impacts my psychology has really given me some empowerment to understand what needs to change and what's fighting against me to change so that I can yield even more to what the Holy Spirit's doing in me to renew my mind, to help me become a stronger. And I love what you just said. You know, it's like these little nuggets and Easter eggs that were left throughout Scripture that they didn't have the science or the words for, but they knew the truth of the practice or the concept of what needs to happen. So I love that. I think that's great. So why are we covering this today?
I am fascinated by it. The first time I was ever introduced to psychology really I was 19 years old, taking a night class, and I was just fascinated. And so I've always been interested in it. At one point in time, I thought I was going to be a counselor, and I don't have the patience for that. So anyway, here we are. I just like it. And it is so funny. Like I use a lot of the verbiage and stuff because I listen to podcasts that are like mental health, whatever, to the point that my husband and I were having a conversation just yesterday. He said, I really wish that you would stop using that psychoanalytical language with me. I was like, but it has value. He said, yes. I'm not saying it doesn't work. I'm saying I don't want you to use those terms because I can tell when you've been listening to a podcast.
Awesome.
But that being said, it's something that I've always been interested in, and I've seen the benefits of it. I personally have been in counseling, in and out of counseling for years. I had my children dealing with various things at different times in their lives. I, wanted professional outside help to be able to point them to things or work through some things. And my husband has struggled with addiction, and he went to a 3-month inpatient faith-based recovery program. So, that being said, I've seen both ends of the spectrum where there's nothing spiritual about it. It's how your brain functions or how your body is responding to trauma, and there's nothing spiritual about it, to the other end of the spectrum where you're just not praying enough. Like, literally, there are places where people will tell you you're just not praying enough. And that is just so devastating when you know that you love God and you're trying the best you can and you're using all the tools, or the other side of that is you're using your grounding techniques, you're going to counseling, and it just seems like you're ruminating on the things because you're just talking about all the things that you're struggling with, but you're not necessarily making any progress. I just feel like we're kind of in the middle of both of those things. And also, a lot of times today, it seems like there is a spiritual component to the younger generation. Like, they believe in something outside of themselves, but it's not biblically based. And so it's all about manifesting or vibrations and all that kind of stuff. And I don't want to minimize that because I can go down a rabbit trail with that too. I believe God is the creator of everything. And so, yeah, those vibrations that we're talking about, there's an energy, and it was created that way for a purpose. So it is going to have an effect on our body, just like the food that we eat is going to have a certain effect on our body. So it's not to minimize that. For me, it's just about, you have to recognize why it has an effect on you.
Absolutely. To me, it comes down to that whole Middle Eastern mindset, a creator over creation, not worshiping the creation, but the creator who created it.
Yes, yes, I love that. Yeah, pointing to who created it, and there has to be a divine design. It can't just be random. I don't know. I don't understand how. That's a disconnect I have with people who just think it just randomly happened, because things are just too specific, and it's beautiful and I love it. So,
And they're too intricate and interwoven and interdependent to me for, like you were saying earlier, about a specific plant in a specific location for a specific animal.
yeah.
That's too specific and it's too interwoven for it to be chance.
So I love how Andrew Huberman on Huberman Lab explains it. He says, so when we're born, our babies' brains have these neural connections that are like a bunch of small little side roads. And as we grow up through the age of 25, those smaller connections are being refined. So it goes from all these little side roads to major highways. So what you may have heard is fires together, wires together. That's what I'm thinking. So the more you do something, the more significant those pathways become. So it's whether it's practicing or an experience that you have that may be early childhood trauma, something like that. The more you experience a specific thing, the more your brain is going to create those pathways. So 1 + 1 is 2.
Kind of what becomes muscle memory on one hand. And the other one that makes me think of what you just said earlier is the scripture that said, meditate what is honorable and pure and good and beautiful. Because like you just said, those neural pathways get worn and it becomes like second nature to think that certain pattern. And I was kind of wondering, we helped both of my husband's grandfathers when they were in their final years passing away. And one of his grandfathers for sure had Alzheimer's, and the other probably had some form of dementia. But what was interesting is who they became at the end because of the neural pathways that they had constantly thought about. One of them, who kind of struggled with some things in his life at the end, was just the most demure and sweet and gentle soul ever. And then the other one, who was a little more on the ornery side,
Yeah.
still was ornery at the end. So I just kind of was wondering, at that of thinking, those neural pathways have been run quite a few times by the time you're in your 80s.
Yes, yeah. And so I think about that, like, my dogs outside, they have a certain little path that they like to walk all the time. And so the grass is, it doesn't grow in those areas. And so that's why when we're trying to, take every thought captive and, you know, try to think about something good and honorable rather than that negative trail that we're trying to go down. I mean, think about if you go out hiking or in the woods or something like that, if you get off the path, you're going to have to move things aside or chop things down. It's going to be an effort to get through there when you're creating a new path.
When I was saying earlier about appreciating understanding neuroscience, or at least how the brain works, when I was taught by one of the books that I read that creating a new neural pathway is physiologically, it is painful. That's why it's painful for us to change. We're feeling what it actually feels not like to lay down a new neural pathway. And then it's going to take 21 times of rolling through that pathway before that one becomes the dominant road as opposed to the old way. Knowing that now makes me a little braver to think a new thought or to consider a new way of doing something, because it's like, oh, okay, it's part of this the physiology for it to actually hurt.
Yes, yes. That reminds me also of, it's been a little while since I read this book, so I can't pull out any like quotes because y'all know me. I'm one of those general idea kind of people. The details are, somewhere out in space. But Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess by Dr. Caroline Leaf. That reminds me of the danger sometimes. I say danger, but it's like when we know a little bit, and I feel like that's also kind of what I see in younger people anyway, because therapy in general and mental health and wellness is talked about more often, and because of things like TikTok and Instagram and all the social media, everybody who has a camera can be an influencer, right? And they get on here and they talk about mental health stuff. And so there's this verbiage and there's an awareness. But the way Dr. Caroline Leaf explains it is sometimes being aware of the issue without having the tools to do anything about it can actually be more damaging. It can be harmful to you because now that you're aware of this mess that you're in, but you don't have a way to get out of it. That is really interesting. The brain itself, though, it's just amazing. So people who might be born deaf or blind or without a limb, so the way our brain is, their specific functions are controlled by certain areas of the brain. Well, there's a thing called like brain mapping, body mapping. If you don't have this particular ability, your brain starts using that space to do something else. That's why, like if there's a stroke or something like that, then you have an ability your brain has an ability to heal. It just takes time and repetition for another area of the brain to take over those functions, right? So I think that is amazing. And another part that our brain does is called proprioception. So we need to know where our body is in time and space, and what's us and what is outside of us. Sometimes when that gets off, when we can't be present in this moment, that automatically puts our body, our nervous system, in a state of fight or flight because it doesn't know where it is and what's going on. So it's automatically saying something's wrong. So that's why it's so important for us to be able to regulate our nervous system. I know that's another one of those like buzzwords right now, but truly, and I say that also as, the middle-aged woman who went through her little thing midlife crisis, and I was regulating my nervous system and doing the tapping and the breathing and being weird, but it works. And there's a reason why it works, because if your body doesn't know that it's safe, then everything is a threat. I mean, that's really the way your body's looking at everything.
Exactly. And I can give a pop culture example of that. So, those of you who are fans of Hunger Games, when PETA comes back from the Capitol, he has himself repeating, I know this, this is what is true. And then Katniss starts doing the same thing. And when I had a major trauma happen a couple of years ago, I had to go back to holding on to these three things I know are true in order to get my mind in the present, not living in the past and not going into the future. Andrea, can you talk a little bit about the podcast that you and I both listened to, Diary of a CEO, where they had the Harvard neuroscientist on, and she talks about after the stroke, because she had had a stroke and it took her, I think, 7 years to come back from that stroke. But what is the big deal about living in the present as opposed to the past or the future?
I loved her story in general, and I don't know if she is a believer or not,
Mhm.
but if you listen to the entire conversation and just the joy that she has for life
Mhm.
and how miraculous our brain is as someone who studies the brain. And that's another beautiful thing about her experience is that's what she did. She taught people about the structure of the brain and the purpose of it, and so her being able to recognize what was happening. But talking about being in the present moment, if we're stuck in the past, and our brain also is trying to predict what's going to happen in the future. So our brain, what we have already experienced, the way we are created is to be able to for look at our environment and make sure that we are safe. But part of that is making predictions based on past things that have happened about what's going to happen. And so, those of us who experience trauma, especially, and whether it's physical trauma, but man, I'm telling you, I really do think emotional and verbal abuse creates more of that because you have to read the room and you have to know if I go to this topic or if I say this thing or if I respond physically in a certain way, then they're going to interpret this and then it's going to be crazy town.
Mhm.
And so, and that's when people, they have to get small and they have to be quiet so that the thing just passes by. So it is so important to be able to use our senses to be present where we are right now. Literally thinking about your senses, what you can feel. And back to that proprioception, if we talk about like our feet. So if you can be barefoot and actually go outside and get some sun and breathe the air and touch the grass, that's beneficial. But even if you're inside barefooted, close your eyes and rub your feet over different textures and try to notice, do I feel that more at the ball of my foot or on my toes or on my heel? So you're just trying to check in with your body and it helps you get into this moment rather than living in a past experience or trying to predict what's going to come around the corner. Another thing is scent. We talked about that a little bit before. So, closing one nostril and breathing in deeply. And of course, any of these that you can add with deep breathing. So, in for 4 counts, hold 4 counts, out 4 counts, that kind of thing. Or just inhale completely and exhale completely. It doesn't have to be anything super fancy. Just taking the time to feel where your breath is when you inhale. Another thing is connecting with the eyes. And I know we've mentioned before in one of our conversations, EMDR, and how eye movement, rapid eye movement, helps you to process things. So if you have something and you hold it at eye level and you keep your eyes focused on that thing, and then you do your head yes for a few seconds and then stop and breathe and then do no, and you're keeping your eyes focused on that one spot, that helps moving things from like the emotional side to the it just is kind of thing. It helps you process some of that stuff. That's why just going for a walk is so beneficial. But what I was gonna say, funny, just connected to the PETA thing, we talk almost every episode about community. And it's also really beautiful that PETA he needs reminding of that. And when he says, sometimes I don't know what's real and what isn't, and they were like, just ask us and we'll tell you. And so having that community around you too, to say, like, I have a friend who lives with schizophrenia. And sometimes it's like, is this real? Are you seeing this too? No, you're just being paranoid right now and it's okay. And we're here. And so having someone, having that community, and whether it's a professional or someone who's lived through the same things, like a peer support specialist or just a friend who loves you and sees you for who you are, the way God created you, and is walking with you through it.
That's so beautiful. One of the other things that the doctor on that episode talked about is we as Western culture Americans are living almost 100% right now in our left brains. And she said, we're not meant to do that. Our left brain is the logical, do the thing, make the checklist, get it done, da 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 da, just constantly on the treadmill. And she's like, your right brain allows you to rest and be creative and
Yeah.
feel the things and do the things. And she said she's wondering if that's why we're seeing such a rise in anxiety, a rise in even in socio and psychopathic behaviors, because we're so living in that left side of our brain. We're not present. We're always thinking, what's the next thing we got to do? And then when we do have the downtime, we're processing what we did. And it's damaging. I know for myself personally, I'm really starting to try to take the time of having a Sabbath. God knew how he designed our brains, and it needs to be shut off once in a while and let it rest. And then the impact that our mental state has on our physical state. It's
Oh,
pretty amazing.
absolutely. Yeah. I love the way she broke it down too, not just left and right brain, but there's a right, like there's an analytical and an emotional to both sides. So we'll definitely link that below so people can hear that. It's a great, great episode. And there's another one in there that we're going to link, Trauma Rewired. And she puts it simply like our input plus our interpretation of whatever that input is. That's why back to being present in the moment where we are and what's happening around us, and even those outside people helping you to interpret that. But the input plus the interpretation is the output. So if we're interpreting it as something that's a danger, that's going to affect what is happening in our body. And so we may notice the nausea or the flash of heat across your body, or the heart racing, or the sweaty palms. Like all of those things are nervous system outputs because of what our brain is interpreting. So yeah, that's just, I just think it's amazing that God created us with these things to help keep us safe and help us function in the world that we're in. But because of sin in the world, all of those things can also be used. It can be harmful the way we are interpreting the things around us. That's why, again, we just keep saying, going back to keeping your eyes on God and thinking about the things that are good and holy and righteous.
Well, it just reminds me of a text conversation you and I had this past week of there, there's a thing going around on a lot of reels right now that you can't simultaneously hold gratitude and
Right.
fear or stress or anxiety. And I was like, well, I'm the one freak of nature who can do both. I can be
Right.
stressed and grateful.
And I'm like, you're not the only one. I could do that too. So we're just special.
Yes, we are. Yes. But it just so helps to know what, like I said, what we're bumping up against when we do something like that. It is not an issue of not being faithful enough or praying enough in some cases. In that case, I'm genuinely anxious about something. I probably need to talk it out, like with a safe person. And then again, them remind me of what's real and what's not real. You're projecting, you're pulling from past trauma in that situation.
Yeah.
And just remind us that sometimes your brain's working against you, or sometimes you need a little trick, Another one that I did find on a reel one time that has really helped. I borderline and am insomniac. I usually live on about 4 to 5 hours of sleep for weeks at a time and then crash. But there's an eye movement that you can do. Close your eyes and you do an arc one way twice and you do it the other way twice, and immediately my body goes and my
Really?
those beta waves that are going crazy, the overthinking everything, it immediately stops, but you can go back to doing it again, but it helps, so there are some tricks. What are some of the things that you do that when you find yourself on a loop to help calm down?
I keep a little bottle of frankincense essential oils with me at work. Being a massage therapist, helps that. So it's normal to just have essential oils. But I will do breathing, deep breathing. That is something that I find myself doing a lot when I'm starting to feel overwhelmed or starting to feel frustrated. That's what I do a lot, is doing some deep breathing exercises. And sometimes I will take the time to actually focus on counting and, all that. But a lot of times it's just breathing in as much as I can take in and kind of holding it for just a second and then exhaling for as long as I can, and doing that a few times. Something else that I do, I started humming. I had gotten this little deck of different things to help calm your vagus nerve, which is like, I think it's the biggest nerve it goes down into the trunk of your body, even to digestion, your digestive system. And so when your nervous system is all out of whack, that's why it does have we have these physical ailments, because that nervous system, that vagus nerve. So there are a lot of different tricks for the vagus nerve, like touching your lips, doing humming, singing. That's why singing is good. And to me, you can look at that also as a time for worship, which is also going to help you plug in to know that something is bigger than you. I think that is something that is beneficial for anyone, especially if you're struggling with anxiety. You think you have to be in control of everything. And just sitting back and saying, I'm not in control of this. There's something bigger than I am. And I think that can bring people peace, whether they're just calling on a higher power. I mean, hopefully, eventually they will get to the truth and know who the one true God is. But just recognizing that there's something bigger than you and you don't have to figure it all out, I think is beneficial.
Well, it just brings to mind another scripture, another nugget or Easter egg that he dropped is be still and know that I am God.
Yeah.
And it's like if we could just sit and really contemplate, meditate, pray on that. What does that mean to know that I can just be still and let go and let him be God over my situation? What
Yeah.
a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. Benevolent detachment too, right?
Our fave.
Another plug for the Pulse app.
Yeah.
If you haven't heard us talk about that before, the Pulse app.
John Eldridge. Whew, he
Yeah.
knows what he's doing. Yep. That's another one. Just giving yourself, whether it's a minute, a 3 minute, a 5 minute. I think they even have a 20 minute now.
Oh, do they? I know. Well, but then they also have talking about how it takes 21 days to create a new habit. He has the Experience Jesus and Resilient. I
Hmm.
think there's two different things that are a 20 or a 30-day little program. So it has a morning and an evening meditation, prayer, worship time. It's kind of all of it wrapped into one. And you can do that morning and evening, and it helps you get into the habit of focusing on something else other than your problems. If we did that, if we just all took about 30 days to stop focusing on the problem,
What a
then
beautiful thing it would be.
right, because we spend so much of our time focused on the negative, and or even go into talk therapy. We can get into that rut. Something that's supposed to be good can be twisted and turned into something that's just going to keep us going down that same negative path.
Hmm.
So yeah, having multiple tools, multiple outlets, multiple resources, community, prayer, worship, all those things are gonna are going to help.
Well, it just reminds me, going back to our favorite guy in the Bible, we're both big David fans.
Yeah.
Just some of his Psalms of I wonder if that's what he was doing, is just sitting for a moment
Uh-huh.
with God, remembering who God is and who he is.
Yeah.
Because I could not imagine facing my bigger Goliaths and having just the instant, you are defiling the God of the heavenly armies,
Right.
and just knowing that it's
Yeah.
fine. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's from a lifestyle of living in that place of the pause.
Yes. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. I hope you took something away from it, even if you're just trying to figure this stuff out like we are. So, thank you for joining us. Next week, we are going to be talking about attachment and our perception of God. And it's going to be a really great conversation. I'm looking forward to it and hope you join us. Until then, stay curious
and keep seeking.
Thank you so much for joining us today. Also Called provides a space for honest conversations about the truth of who God is, who we are, and the relationships He wants us to have with Him, each other, the church, and ourselves. This episode was just the start of the conversation. Be sure to check the show notes for extra resources to go further. You can also find our social media sites to join the discussion. Don't miss our next chat by subscribing to our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Also Called is part of Bible and Pop Culture, a crowd-funded nonprofit that allows us to provide our content to start great conversations for free. You can help us keep doing this by checking out BibleandPopCulture.com or AlsoCalled.org's donate subscribe buttons with a one-time gift, supporting us monthly, or sharing us with someone who might like the conversation. Thank you for being a part, and see you next conversation.